What's up, YouTube? Hey, the other day I was kind of down. I was kind of anxious and stressed out. I was wondering, did I do the right thing by quitting my job when I'm 50 years old and have a family and things aren't kind of going exactly as I planned? And, it wasn't a comfortable and good feeling. And I just want to share with you how I deal with these types of situations, when I get stressed out. And perhaps that could help you as well. And, what I do is just I recall and remember that all this is just a simulation. And that kind of puts everything back into perspective again, and it lets me then get out of that rut. And so what do I mean by this is a simulation? Well, that's just what it is, right? You want to call it the universe or whatever, but all this is just something that's really not real. It's something that our minds construct. And let me explain to you why that's the case. A couple of years ago, the Nobel Prize for Physics was given to 3 scientists who definitively proved that there's no such thing as local reality, at least at the subatomic level, which in layman's terms means unless something is measured, which implies that it's observed, it doesn't exist. Like it's not really real, which is kind of like mind-blowing if you think about it. But they prove that there's no doubt about that now, right? That's an accepted fact. And something that had been theorized for quite some time, but now proven without a doubt. So that means unless something is measured or to some degree observed, it doesn't exist, right? Which kind of plays to the whole concept of us being in a simulation. Unless we turn around and, I call it render, like the way your computer renders an image, unless we turn around and look at something, observe it, measure it, and render it, it doesn't exist. And that's what part of being a simulation is. Now, there's other clues and things that are telling us that we're also in a simulation. If you ever, I don't know if any of you program or develop games, but if you recall, there was a popular game called Doom before, and Quake, the game that came after it. And, game developers know this, but there's a hack that the game developers used to really speed up the performance of the game back then. It was to put it into, again, layman's terms, just this constant value, right? That just shortcutted the calculation of the inverse square root of something. And they just used that and approximated things, and it just made the game work so much faster on the CPU back then. And so that was a known hack, and people used it back in the days. And we have new versions of these types of hacks. But the point here is there's these constants in virtual games that we build, right, that we know of. And if we look around this simulation or this universe, you want to call it, we have the same thing, right? Simple ones like from the number pi, 3.14, all the way to more complex ones. Like if you ever took physics, there's something called Planck's constant. And there's also the Fibonacci number sequences, right? These recurring number sequences that we see over and over again, whether it be in the galaxies and, the spirals of the galaxies and the sequence and the shapes and the fractional, all the way down to stock trading or in seashells, right? So we see these clues all around us that also hint and point to that we're really just in a simulation, and essentially our bodies are just rendering machines. They're like super advanced VR goggles that isn't just vision, but is vision, smell, touch, audio, everything all combined, right? And a biological, not a mechanical, but a biological machine that's this super duper advanced, AR or VR goggles that you need to experience this simulation, right? And as we, go around the simulation with our goggles, we render the simulation reality by observing it, and that is what we call, in our definition, reality, right? But that's really no different than what a universe is in the old text. And even if you're religious and it doesn't go against it. It's just updating the vocabulary, right? We just have learned more, so the way in which we can understand and conceptualize things and write it down has improved, right? So we update our vocabulary in the way we describe constants because we now have a better and fine-tuned understanding of certain basic concepts about life and reality. So what does that mean to us going around this? Well, it puts it into perspective, right? If you're stressed out about some deadline or something not going the way you thought, you just got to take it with a grain of salt because it's not really real. It isn't. We're just going around rendering this simulation, right? That's all it is. And the piece about, our emotions, that too is not real. I mean, it's real in the sense that we experience it, right? So the simulation and going about it, rendering stuff is all about experiences. That's what it all boils down to, is our experience and memories of us rendering the simulation as we're going around, stumbling around, going in different crevices and trying different things. But even our emotions, even though we feel and experience it, it's really not real, right? It's just something that our brain manufactures. More specifically, within our brain, there's a part in it called the amygdala, and that's part of the whole function of generating emotions and feelings, right? And you probably know, like, fight or flight. That's the way we evolved from cavemen to get scared when you see a snake and jump away, all the way now, it's converted into like corporate culture, fight or flight. Like, it's not a snake anymore, but maybe there's a snake at work. And figure out what to do, and it stirs up emotions, and it kind of like, if you aren't careful, it takes over and controls you, so on and so forth. But all that is still manufactured within the brain through chemical reactions in your amygdala. So really, yeah, the experience is what you feel, but it's not really real, right? And let me tell you now what is real, and this is the part that matters, right? And gets me out of like the anxious and the stress. What's real is the choices that you make. It all boils down to choices. And that's where you question, well, if your body is in a super advanced VR headset, then who's wearing it, right? And I'm not going to answer that here, because the answer to that can go in many different ways, and because we can't explain it, it relies on faith, and then that's where religion comes in. So you have many different religions that try to explain like who is wearing this VR goggles, and that's beyond this convo. But just know that there is that something is, deciding where to go in the simulation and rendering your experiences, and that's through choice. And so, if you think about what light and dark, so the light and darkness, they have to coexist, right? You can't have light if you have no concept of what darkness is, right? And vice versa. Like if there's no darkness, you won't even understand what light would be, right? And it's the same thing with choices. You can't have choices and not have consequences. In other words, without consequences, there's no meaning to choices, and the vice versa as well. So they both have to coexist. So here's the deal. The choices is what matters, right? Not what happens around you or what you're rendering around the simulation and what the simulation, throws at you as a surprise, or maybe as not a surprise, or whatever. But you're going around rendering this stuff with your body and your brain. Can't control that. But what you can control is the choices that you make based on the rendering, the input and output that's going on around you. And then there's consequences. And so, until you exit the simulation, you always are able to make a choice, right? That is the one thing and the only thing that ultimately matters, is no matter what led to wherever you are now, you can still make a choice, right? Always, until the simulation ends or you peace out. And so it doesn't matter like all the choices you made in the past that led up to wherever you are now. All that matters is where you are now and whatever choice you're going to make, right? Whatever choice you make now, it can be completely detached from all the choices you made before. And you can start paving and pivoting to a new direction based on the choice you make now. And that's if you take control of the situation and be the master of yourself, be the master of the VR goggle, and make choices and start making choices. So that's something that really helps me. It's like no matter what position or difficulty or challenge I find myself in, there's no point in going back and revisiting and rehashing all the choices that led you up to here. All that really matters is that you are here rendering right now the simulation that isn't real, right? It's not real. You're just rendering the experience. But what's real is the choice that you can make. And so then there's the path forward, right? And that's the important thing. And that's what gets me out of, stressful situations and, steers me away from depression, is understanding, number one, that there is no such thing as reality. Like, this is all just being rendered. So like, just take a chill pill about it. It's a simulation. And then the second thing is that it's really what is real though is the choices, and that is something you have full control over if you master your VR goggle, and you can then set the path forward and not be controlled by the choices you've made in the past that led you to where you are at this moment in time. So I hope this message helps some of you who might be going in some sort of challenging or difficult situations. It absolutely helps me. I use it every time and prevents me from getting into a rut. And with that, hope to see you in the next episode. Peace out.